Indrani Mukerjea, Rhea Sen, and Detective Vikram Joshi III lives intertwined by ambition, secrets, and a web of deception that no one could escape, set the stage for a chilling tale of power, betrayal, and buried truths. Indrani Mukerjea was a woman who seemed to glide effortlessly through life, leaving a trail of admiration, envy, and curiosity in her wake. Her presence commanded attention the moment she entered a room, her elegance and charm concealing layers of calculation and ambition. From the outside, her life looked like a perfect mosaic of wealth, influence, and social acclaim. Her marriage to Samar Roy, a man who appeared calm and composed, gave her an image of stability and domestic success. But the glittering surface hid currents of unease and secrecy. The couple had been seen together at numerous high-profile events, smiling for cameras and shaking hands with politicians, business magnates, and media personalities. Yet, those who paid closer attention noticed the subtle inconsistencies, the way Indrani's eyes would shift ever so slightly when certain names were mentioned, or the guarded way she spoke about past relationships. People admired her ambition, her capacity to move through society with grace. But they rarely questioned the forces behind her rise. Indrani's career in the media industry had been nothing short of meteoric. She had co-founded a media empire with Arjun Mehra, a man whose influence and connections rivaled some of the most powerful figures in the country. Together, they built an organization that dominated television and digital news, shaping public opinion with skill and precision. The empire seemed unshakable, yet the very success that earned her fame also sowed the seeds of suspicion. Colleagues and competitors whispered about opaque business deals, unexplained expenses, the rapid disappearance of personnel who had once questioned leadership decisions, even in her personal life. Indrani's ability to control perception was remarkable. Her stepdaughter, Rhea Sen, was often in awe of her stepmother's poise and charm. But there were moments when Rhea felt a strange distance, an unspoken tension that lingered beneath the surface. Certain rooms in the family home were off limits, certain conversations carefully avoided, and certain topics, particularly Rhea's mother, seemed to ignite invisible alarms. Indrani had a way of steering attention, of making people focus on what she wanted, leaving critical questions buried outside her family life. Indrani's social circle was both extensive and meticulously curated. She surrounded herself with journalists, socialites, and politicians who could advance her ambitions or protect her interests. These alliances were not born purely out of friendship. They were strategic moves in a game she played better than anyone. Invitations to lavish parties, charitable events, and cultural galas became opportunities to reinforce her public image while keeping her private maneuvers hidden from view. She understood that influence was built as much on perception as on reality, and she was an expert architect of both. Yet, beneath the glamour and strategic brilliance, there were subtle signs that all was not as it seemed. Financial records hinted at transfers that lacked clear explanations. Staff members reported sudden firings and replacements that made little sense. An air of unease hovered around those who had the misfortune of probing too deeply into her affairs. Indrani's life was a labyrinth, and anyone entering it without caution risked becoming lost or worse, disappearing entirely from view. The city she inhabited seemed to both celebrate and fear her, an intoxicating combination that added to her allure. Media coverage praised her entrepreneurial skill and sophistication, while rumors and whispers circulated quietly among those who sensed there was more to her story. It was a delicate balance she maintained effortlessly, one smile and one handshake at a time, hiding shadows behind an impeccable public facade. Even Samar Roy, her husband, sometimes questioned the undercurrents in their lives, but never allowed. His role appeared to be the anchor, the stabilizing force in a world of luxury and influence. Yet, there were moments when even he wondered how much of their lives were reality, and how much was carefully staged. Indrani's ambition was not just a personal trait. It was a force that reshaped everyone and everything around her. bending circumstances to her favor. In public, she was untouchable. In private, she was calculating, always measuring, always planning. Each decision, each smile, each gesture seemed designed to maintain the facade, to hide the truths that might one day emerge. And, though the first signs of unrest in her carefully constructed world were subtle, they were real. Tiny fissures had begun to appear in the glittering veneer, faint shadows hinting at the darker story that lurked beneath. For now, the world saw only a dazzling, untouchable media mogul. But the undercurrents of suspicion, fear, and secrecy were quietly gathering strength, waiting for the day when the truth could no longer be contained. The disappearance of Ria Sen's biological mother had always been a shadow over her childhood, a mystery that no one in the family openly discussed. Ria had grown up feeling the weight of absence, sensing that there were truths deliberately kept from her. Her stepmother, Indrani Mukerjea, was elegant, charming, and controlling, a figure who could command a room without raising her voice. Yet there was an undercurrent of unease in her presence that Ria could not ignore. She watched carefully, noticing the subtle ways Indrani influenced conversations, managed appearances, and silenced questions with a smile. As Ria entered her teenage years, her curiosity became harder to contain. She found herself drawn to the private corners of the household, two locked drawers and cabinets that seemed deliberately off. One day, while exploring a seldom used study, she discovered a small, hidden compartment. Inside were letters, envelopes, and documents that had been carefully stored away. The papers contained names, addresses, and transactions that painted a troubling picture of influence and control. There were hints of missing individuals, unexplained financial movements, and references to people who had vanished from public view. The sense of a deliberate cover-up began to take shape in Ria's mind. Meanwhile, Sheena Bora, an investigative journalist, was building her own puzzle from outside the family. She had been following stories of missing women and unsolved disappearances in the elite circles of the city. Patterns emerged: people who had connections with influential figures, suddenly disappearing or reappearing under mysterious circumstances. Her investigation led her to Indrani Mukerjea, a figure who was both celebrated and whispered about in the media. Kiran sensed that behind Indrani's polished public image, there was a complex network of manipulation, secrecy, and intimidation that required unraveling. Ria's discoveries became increasingly difficult to ignore. Old letters hinted at clandestine arrangements, and receipts suggested payments made to silence or influence people. The documents exposed a world that seemed far removed from the glamour and sophistication she saw every day. She realized that the life she had taken for granted was carefully constructed, and that her stepmother's control extended far beyond the household. Each revelation made her both fearful and determined, afraid of the consequences, yet unwilling to remain blind to the truth. The tension in the household grew. Indrani's presence, once a source of fascination for Ria, now became intimidating. The older woman's ability to project calm while managing hidden forces was almost terrifying. Ria understood that any wrong move could provoke a response from someone who was used to controlling outcomes. She had to navigate this world carefully, learning to observe without drawing attention, to piece together fragments of information without alerting Indrani to her. Discoveries: Kiran's investigation intersected with Ria's discoveries in ways that neither could fully anticipate. The journalist uncovered property records, financial transactions, and private communications that corroborated Ria's findings. Kiran realized that the puzzle was larger than she had imagined. The missing women, the unexplained disappearances, and the manipulations of powerful individuals all pointed back to the same figure, Indrani Mukerjea. The realization was chilling. This was not the behavior of a woman operating alone, but of someone whose influence had reached deep into the city's elite, shaping events with precision and secrecy. For Ria, the sense of urgency grew with every piece of evidence she unearthed. The woman she had admired, who had appeared to be the pillar of the family, was also a master of concealment and control. The house that had once seemed safe became a labyrinth of hidden truths and unspoken fears. Each discovery increased the stakes, making it clear that the truths she sought were dangerous, not only to uncover, but to even acknowledge in the outside world. Kiran Basha began publishing her findings cautiously, aware that she was touching on a story that involved influential figures capable of manipulation and intimidation. The investigation was slow, methodical, and risky, requiring careful navigation to avoid detection while building a case. The deeper she dug, the more she realized that the missing pieces were connected to Indrani's life, her career, and the network of people she had cultivated over years of careful maneuvering. As the shadows of the past and the mysteries of the present converged, a picture began to emerge, a pattern of calculated actions, hidden threats, and silenced voices. Ria and Kiran, each on their separate paths, were beginning to glimpse the full scope of the deception. The world around them, so polished and glamorous, was underlain with secrets that had been buried deliberately, waiting for someone brave enough to unearth them. And as the threads of the puzzle slowly intertwined, it became clear that uncovering the truth would not be simple, safe, or predictable. Detective Vikram Joshi had always been known for his persistence, a man who never let a lead go cold, and never allowed public pressure to dictate the course of an investigation. When a routine missing person case landed on his desk, he initially expected a straightforward inquiry, but almost immediately, he sensed something far more complex lurking beneath the surface. The connections, the inconsistencies, and the subtle manipulations pointed toward a figure who operated with precision and control. Indrani Mukerjea. Vikram began by retracing the steps of those who had disappeared, individuals who had once been close to Indrani, or had crossed paths with her in business or social circles. Each lead seemed to reveal a pattern. People who had raised questions, expressed doubts, or threatened her carefully constructed narrative had vanished without a trace. Some left behind whispers of fear. Others had financial or professional records that abruptly ended. The detective realized he was not simply investigating isolated incidents. He was uncovering a network of influence and intimidation that spanned years. Indrani's public persona was impeccable. In meetings, on camera, and in social events, she radiated calm, sophistication, and authority. Yet Vikram understood that beneath this veneer lay a mind that was both meticulous and ruthless. The more he investigated, the more he recognized the danger inherent in exposing her. She had built a fortress of power around herself, with layers of lawyers, business partners, and influential friends who could obscure the truth and deflect scrutiny. Every step he took required caution, planning, and the anticipation of her possible countermoves. The deeper Vikram dug, the more he uncovered about the methods she employed. Financial records revealed unexplained transfers and accounts that seemed to exist solely to manage discrete arrangements. Private investigators, who had attempted to trace certain leads, either vanished or abandoned their work under mysterious circumstances. Those who had questioned her decisions in professional settings were swiftly marginalized or removed entirely. The detective began to understand that Indrani's control extended beyond mere influence. It was a system designed to erase opposition and protect her empire at all costs. Vikram found himself constantly second-guessing the reliability of witnesses. Some were fearful of retaliation, others unwilling to reveal details that might endanger their careers or families. Even those who were willing to speak often provided fragmented information, leaving the detective to piece together an intricate puzzle with only half the pieces. Each revelation brought new complications, raising the stakes and intensifying the tension surrounding the investigation. Despite the obstacles, Vikram could not ignore the trail of anomalies. Patterns emerged from the chaos. Recurring names, overlapping timelines, and unexplained coincidences that hinted at deliberate orchestration. It became evident that Indrani's influence reached into multiple sectors, from media and business to politics and law enforcement. The detective realized that confronting her was not simply a matter of gathering evidence. It was a confrontation with a carefully engineered reality. one in which truth could be concealed behind charm, power, and intimidation. As he delved further, Vikram began to sense the psychological aspect of the case. Indrani's ability to manipulate perception, to control narratives, and to preempt scrutiny was not merely a professional skill, it was a deeply ingrained survival mechanism. She seemed to anticipate every question, every suspicion, every attempt to uncover the truth, and had already prepared subtle defenses to neutralize them. The detective understood that uncovering the reality of her actions would require not just investigative skill, but patience, strategy, and an unwavering commitment to the pursuit of justice. Vikram also realized the broader implications of the case. The network of influence, fear, and manipulation that Indrani had created was emblematic of a system that enabled power to operate without accountability. The investigation was no longer just about a single individual. It was a probe into the mechanisms that allowed secrets to remain buried, that silenced voices and shaped outcomes according to the desires of the influential dot. With each day that passed, the tension escalated. Every discovery brought both progress and danger, and every lead risked exposure. Yet Vikram's resolve only strengthened. He knew that the moment of truth would not arrive easily, that the unraveling of Indrani Mukerjea's carefully maintained world would be a slow, meticulous process. The deeper he went, the clearer it became that he was approaching a confrontation that could change everything, not only for those who had disappeared, but for the world that had celebrated her brilliance while remaining oblivious to the shadows behind it. The deeper Rhea delved into the secrets surrounding her stepmother, the more she realized the extent of the deception that had shaped her life. Hidden drawers, locked cabinets, and old files revealed fragments of a reality that had been carefully suppressed. Letters hinted at financial transactions and communications with people who no longer existed in public records. Receipts, notes, and photographs slowly pieced together a pattern of control, manipulation, and silence. It was becoming increasingly clear that Indrani Mukerjea had built a life that was a meticulously constructed illusion, one designed to maintain power and eliminate threats before they could emerge. Rhea's discoveries were amplified by Kiran Bash's investigative work. The journalist had spent months tracing leads, interviewing sources, and following financial trails that seemed deliberately tangled. Kiran uncovered bank accounts, property records, and communications that confirmed the suspicions Rhea had begun to sense. The evidence pointed to an extensive network of influence, stretching across industries, media, and politics. Every piece of information seemed to deepen the mystery, revealing the calculated precision with which Indrani had orchestrated events to her advantage. What shocked Rhea the most was the realization that her stepmother's manipulations were not limited to business or public appearances. They had infiltrated the family itself. The letters and documents revealed strategies to control perceptions, to create loyalty through fear and dependency, and to ensure that inconvenient truths were buried. The life Rhea had grown up in, with its polished fayettes and luxurious comforts, was layered over a foundation of careful surveillance, coercion, and intimidation. Even family members who had been closest to Indrani were not immune from her reach. They had been subtly influenced to accept her version of reality without question. Meanwhile, Detective Vikram Joshi was piecing together the timeline of disappearances and manipulations. Each new discovery brought clarity, but also new questions. People who had crossed Indrani or questioned her authority had vanished under circumstances that were difficult to trace. Vikram realized that uncovering the truth would require him to navigate a labyrinth of power and influence, where one wrong step could compromise the investigation or put witnesses in danger. He understood that Indrani was not simply evasive. She was proactive in controlling every variable, anticipating challenges, and neutralizing threats before they could fully manifest. As Rhea and Kiran's paths began to converge, the scale of the conspiracy became apparent. Together, they compared notes, mapped timelines, and identified gaps in the narratives that had been presented to the public. The investigation revealed a startling pattern. Those who threatened Indrani's carefully curated world, whether intentionally or by accident, were systematically silenced. Financial leverage, social influence, and fear were all tools in her arsenal, wielded with precision to maintain control over those around her. The extent of the orchestration was dizzying. It seemed as though every detail of her life, from social interactions to business decisions, had been calculated to maintain the illusion while eliminating vulnerability. Rhea began to feel the weight of the truth pressing down on her. The woman she had once admired for her sophistication and charm was now someone she feared. Indrani's elegance had masked a calculating mind capable of exploiting weaknesses and bending circumstances to her will. Every discovery brought a mixture of anger, disbelief, and a growing determination to expose the reality that had been hidden for so long. Kiran understood the risks as well. Publishing any of the evidence prematurely could endanger sources, witnesses, and even herself. The journalist had to proceed cautiously, verifying every document, corroborating every account, and building a narrative that could withstand the influence of one of the most powerful and cunning figures in the city. Each revelation, no matter how shocking, was meticulously cross-checked and contextualized, forming a web of proof that could not be dismissed. As the hidden truths emerged, the facade of Indrani Mukerjea's life began to crack. Her influence, her charm, and her public image had shielded her from scrutiny for years. But the combined efforts of Rhea and Kiran were exposing the carefully buried reality. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, revealing a story of control, manipulation, and silenced voices that could no longer remain hidden. The closer they got to the full picture, the more dangerous the journey became. But the stakes were too high to turn back. The truth, long buried, was finally clawing its way to the surface. The moment of reckoning arrived slowly, like a storm gathering on the horizon. Rhea and Kiran, having painstakingly pieced together fragments of hidden truths, now faced the culmination of their discoveries. The evidence, once scattered and incomplete, had formed a coherent narrative of manipulation, coercion, and silenced voices. Every document, photograph, and financial record pointed toward Indrani Mukerjea as the architect of a carefully constructed world in which power, influence, and fear ensured that no one could challenge her authority. The realization of the scope of her control was staggering. Indrani had not merely built a media empire. She had created an ecosystem of influence that extended into private lives, corporate dealings, and political circles. Her ability to anticipate, manipulate, and silence had allowed her to operate unchecked for years. Rhea could see it all. Now the subtle ways in which her stepmother had erased inconvenient truths, the strategies employed to control perceptions, and the networks built to protect her from scrutiny. Each revelation left Rhea both horrified and determined. The most shocking discovery, however, came from within the family itself. Samar Roy, the man whose calm demeanor had once suggested innocence, revealed the depth of his reluctant complicity. He explained how he had been drawn into Indrani's orbit of influence, coerced through subtle pressure and the promise of maintaining a public facade. While he had not been an active participant in her manipulations, he had enabled them by remaining silent, by prioritizing appearances over truth. The revelation painted a chilling picture of the extent to which Indrani had infiltrated even the closest relationships, turning trust into leverage and affection into control. Kiran, armed with verified documents, witness accounts, and financial evidence, began publishing her findings cautiously. Each revelation sent shockwaves through the media and society. Stories of missing individuals, financial manipulations, and unreported crimes painted a disturbing portrait of a woman whose public brilliance masked a pattern of exploitation. Indrani's name, once synonymous with elegance and ambition, was now inseparable from controversy, suspicion, and fear. The reaction was swift. The elite circles that had once shielded her began to distance themselves, and scrutiny intensified in ways that Indrani could no longer fully control. Rhea, now fully aware of the dangers, took steps to preserve the evidence and protect herself. She knew that exposing Indrani completely would provoke resistance, perhaps even retaliation. Every decision became strategic, every move calculated to maintain both safety and impact. Her courage, honed through years of observation and fear, allowed her to navigate the treacherous path between revelation and survival. The world she had once accepted, without question, now demanded vigilance, courage, and determination. Despite the fear and tension, the pursuit of truth remained relentless. Detective Vikram Joshi coordinated with authorities, corroborating evidence and connecting threads that had long been ignored. The investigation revealed not only Indrani's manipulations, but also the broader systems that allowed her to operate unchallenged. The interplay of power, fear, and silence was illuminated, exposing vulnerabilities in structures that had previously seemed the implications extended beyond a single individual, highlighting a societal willingness to overlook hidden transgressions in favor of glamour and status. In the end, the exposure of Indrani Mukerjea was both dramatic and unsettling. Legal proceedings were initiated, and while the full extent of her influence could not be undone, accountability finally began to take shape. The world witnessed the unraveling of a life that had been meticulously staged, a narrative that had relied on charm, intimidation, and secrecy. Yet the story did not end with closure. It left a lingering awareness that power can manipulate reality, that perception can be weaponized, and that even the most elegant facades can conceal darkness. Rhea and Kiran emerged from the ordeal, changed, their lives forever, shaped by the courage required to confront a force as formidable as Indrani Mukerjea. The truths they uncovered would resonate for years, a reminder that some realities, long buried beneath wealth, influence, and charm, require relentless persistence to be revealed. And as society absorbed the revelations, the story of control, manipulation, and silenced voices remained a cautionary tale. Appearances can deceive, and the pursuit of truth, no matter how dangerous, is the only path to uncovering what has been hidden. If you want, I can create a full set of text prompts for YouTube visuals for each chapter, with grainy, cinematic effects to match your documentary style, and make thumbnails or story visuals more compelling. Do you want me to do that next?